Hi everyone. I hope you all had a happy Ascension Day. You didn't know it was Ascension Day? On Thursday? That's okay. I didn't really focus on it much myself until I looked at the readings for this week and realized that we're almost to Pentecost, the end of this Easter season. As I've said before, I've kind of lost track of time and wasn't really fully counting. And it's also really strange to not be traveling around town much now that it's warm and we can work in gardens and to plant things. That's not saying I'm caught up on the weeding, but that's a whole other story. This also means that we're wrapping up another year for our narrative lectionary. I'm still working on plans for the summer. I don't think I'll follow the narrative lectionary schedule, since one of the options is spending 5 weeks on the book of Job. I'm just not sure I can handle that this year. Today's lectionary reading is from 1 Corinthians 15, Paul's conclusion to that letter, emphasizing for his followers, for his disciples, that his teachings were not his own. They came from Jesus, and that for him the key points of his faith are salvation and the hope of resurrection. These are certainly important points and have been highlighted by many Christians over the centuries, but they were not the only part of Jesus' teachings. Jesus did offer his followers hope for the future, but he also offered lessons and a way to live to change their lives here and now. Some other churches will be following the Revised Common Lectionary and talking about John 17 this weekend. It's not directly the story of the Ascension, but it's his prayers at the Last Supper for his disciples who will carry on without him. I think that both of these passages speak to our current situation. 1 Corinthians 15 reminds us that ultimately there is more to life than just what we experience on earth. So learning to follow God is important and gives us hope. Hope is especially important right now when so many people are afraid of what will happen in a situation we have so little control over. John 17 reminds us that the disciples faced uncertain times too. How to go on with their ministry when Jesus was gone. How to speak publicly in a time when Jesus' teachings presented a threat to Roman authorities. How to keep going when their normal practices didn't work anymore. A lot of us have been trying to figure this out as we try to go on for ourselves. How to take care of our families. How to care for ourselves. How to plan for an uncertain future. And of course, this isn't just a Christian issue. It's one that all of our communities face and that other religious groups are facing as well, particularly as we all address the question of how and when to reopen our buildings and resume in-person services and keep each other safe. Some of my Jewish friends speak of the Jewish concept of pikuach nefesh, that is the preservation of human life, and the fact that for them, preserving human life overrides any other rules. Many synagogues are therefore staying closed and even using video broadcasts that they would normally not use for the sake of keeping people safe. Ramadan ended on Saturday for the Muslim community. Normally this would be a community-wide celebration. This time it's just being done in families. Normally there would have been food collected to share with local food pantries, but out of safety concerns, the Muslim community in our area is instead donating money and making grants available to many local charities rather than trying to risk any possible contamination through the collection process. In the Sikh community, it is a common practice to not cut one's hair as a sign of devotion to God, and thus men will have long beards and will cover their long hair under their turbans. There are some Sikh men that have been in the news recently who have decided to cut their beards, something they would never have imagined doing, so that they can properly wear masks to keep those around them safe. This brings me to the ongoing debates on local and national levels as to whether churches should be closed, and whether governors' orders to keep the buildings closed are violations of religious freedom. I'm not a constitutional scholar, so I defer parts of that question to others. But since churches are still responsible for following safety guidelines for fire safety, for use of proper building materials, for sanitation practices in the kitchen, etc., I'm okay with local and state officials setting guidelines about when and how we should reopen buildings. Yes, they're saying right now that groups of up to 10 people can meet at churches. But how exactly would we do that for Sunday services? Right now, we're in phase 1 for industry in our region, and communities would not, and churches rather, would not open until phase 4, hopefully this summer. But even then, I'd want to make sure we're doing it properly. In a sense, I'd compare this health issue to the questions that St. Peter's and other churches have faced in terms of accessibility. If we didn't have our elevator, there are people who could not safely attend services because they can't climb stairs. And I don't think it would be right to say, well, you're welcome to come, and if you can't come up the stairs, you can just listen from downstairs because there's no elevator. That wouldn't be very welcoming. Right now, without widespread testing, treatment, or a vaccine to prevent the virus, talking about returning to in-person services seems to me a lot like a question of accessibility. If we say we're going to have services and try to sit at a distance, but we know it's not safe for a significant number of our members, even if they're sitting at a distance, is that really welcoming? Is that really including them? Might we not be better off continuing with recorded messages and phone calls and other ways of interacting? We've been sharing these weekly messages on Facebook and email. I'm also looking at other options to allow people without computers or internet access to listen to them by phone, making it more accessible. I do look forward to the chance to be together in person, to share communion, eventually to sing together. It will be a joyful noise. And I definitely look forward to the times at the end of the service when the kids go to the back of the sanctuary to get up speed as they run to give me a hug. But it's not safe right now. And after what has happened at some churches that have resumed services, I don't want to put any of you at risk. And besides, even if the buildings are closed, the church and its ministry are not closed. One friend shared a comment they saw that said, "The building is empty and silent, but the church is buzzing." Or as the Episcopal Bishop-elect in Missouri wrote this week, "The work of the church is essential. The work of caring for the lonely, the marginalized, and the oppressed is essential. The work of speaking truth to power and seeking injustice is essential. The work of being a loving, liberating, and life-giving presence in the world is essential. The work of welcoming the stranger, the refugee, and the undocumented is essential. The work of reconciliation and healing and caring is essential. The church does not need to open because the church never closed. We who make up the body of Christ, the church, love God and our neighbors and ourselves so much that we will stay away from our buildings until it is safe. We are the church." On this Memorial Day weekend, as we remember those who sacrificed their lives in service for our country, let us remember that there are still ways we can serve God and our community, even if we cannot meet together in person. Even if we are staying at home, we can carry on Jesus' work in the world. Have a good week, my friends.